The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as I sat alone in the living room. The soft glow of the evening light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows on the walls. But the silence between Mehran and me felt louder than any noise could ever be. Once, our home was filled with laughter, love, and the comfort of shared moments. But now, it was a place of tension, of unspoken words, and of a love that had faded into something cold and unrecognizable. I thought back to the woman I once was, the woman who was loved unconditionally by her husband. How did I lose that? How did we go from passionate embraces to distant stares, from whispered sweet nothings to biting silence? It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Mehran made me feel like I was his everything, when his love was my safe haven. But now, it felt like I was just a ghost in his life, someone he barely acknowledged. The affair had shattered me most of all. I betrayed the man who gave me everything, and in return, he gave me nothing but indifference. I could still see the hurt in his eyes, the quiet anger he'd never let me forget. He didn't want me anymore, not the way he used to. He didn't desire me. He didn't cherish me. He only wanted control, a power I hadn't realized I'd lost until it was too late. It all started so innocently, too innocently, in hindsight. Ethan was a colleague, someone I'd known for years, but never really noticed beyond the occasional work-related conversation. But everything changed one evening when we ended up in the same meeting, just the two of us, alone after hours. There was an unexpected warmth to his smile, an ease in his voice that made me feel seen in a way that had become foreign to me. Mehran and I had been distant for months, maybe even longer. We drifted apart quietly, like two people whose lives had grown so different that the space between us felt impossible to bridge. We no longer shared the late-night talks or the tender glances that once made me feel like his world revolved around me. I tried to ignore the loneliness, to convince myself that it was just a phase, that we would find our way back. But every time I reached out, every time I tried to make him notice me, he pulled away. Ethan noticed. At first, it was just small gestures, a casual compliment about my dress, a joke that made me laugh when I thought I had forgotten how. His attention was like a balm for a wound I didn't realize was so deep. And then, one evening, we found ourselves alone in the office after everyone else had left. The tension in the air was undeniable. He stepped closer, his eyes holding mine in a way that felt new, charged with something neither of us said out loud. "I've always admired you, Noor," he said softly, his hand brushing against mine. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down my spine. And before I could think, before I could stop myself, I kissed him. The kiss was an escape. For a moment, it was just about feeling wanted, feeling alive. And in Ethan's arms, I felt both desired and understood, something I hadn't felt in so long. It wasn't about love, not at first. It was about validation, a spark of excitement that I thought I had lost forever. And before I knew it, I was lost in a moment that seemed too perfect, too easy to ever be real. When Mehran found out about the affair, it was as if the light went out of our home. The quiet rage in his eyes wasn't the same as the hurt I had expected. No, this was something different, something cold. There was a distance in him now, a wall that had gone up between us, and it felt insurmountable. At first, he said nothing, not a word. He didn't shout or cry like I had imagined. He just withdrew. It was worse than anything I had feared. The silence in our house grew heavier with each passing day, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for anything to break the stillness. I didn't know what to expect, what he needed from me, but I knew one thing for sure. He didn't love me the way he once did. The first time we spoke after the revelation, his voice was steady, but there was an edge to it I'd never heard before. "I want you to understand something," he said, his eyes hard, unblinking. "You're not the woman I married anymore. You lost that privilege the moment you decided to betray me." His words cut through the air, and I could feel every ounce of their truth. There was no apology in his tone, no attempt to understand. Just cold, calculated detachment. In the days that followed, Mehran became someone I barely recognized. He would still come home every evening, but he was distant, like a stranger in his own house. At first, I tried to engage him, to reach out, but every time I did, He shut me down with sharp words, or a look that made me feel smaller, less than I had ever felt before. He didn't yell at me. No, Mehran's power over me was much subtler than that. He didn't need to scream to make me feel the weight of my actions. He used silence as a weapon, refusing to touch me, refusing to look at me the same way. I catch glimpses of him when he thought I wasn't looking, his gaze cold and distant, never softening. The man who once held me in his arms at night, who whispered sweet nothings into my ear, was gone. He started controlling the small things, too. The way I dressed, the way I spoke. He'd make passive-aggressive comments about my appearance, as if to remind me that I wasn't the woman I used to be in his eyes. He would tell me things like, "It's a shame you don't take better care of yourself," or "You could be so much more if you actually tried." It was as if he was holding everything against me, every moment of affection, every laugh we shared, every intimate memory like a weapon he could use whenever he felt like reminding me of my failure. But it wasn't just the comments. It was how he kept me at arm's length, how he would pull away whenever I tried to get close. We no longer shared the warmth that used to fill the spaces between us. When I'd try to touch his hand, he'd pull away. When I'd lean in for a kiss, he'd avoid my lips, his eyes distant and cold. Mehran didn't want me anymore. He didn't want the woman he had once loved. He wanted something else, something darker. He wanted control, and I was helpless to stop it. Every day felt like a battle. I woke up in the same bed, in the same house, with the same man who was no longer mine. The world outside seemed to move on, but inside the walls of our home, time stood still, suffocated by the weight of unspoken words and fractured trust. I could feel Mehran's presence, but it wasn't the same. Gone were the quiet moments we used to share, the laughter that used to fill our rooms. Now, there was only a quiet, palpable tension, a heavy silence that lingered between us like an unwanted guest. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway, his sighs, but it all felt so distant, so foreign. The man I had married, the man I had loved with all my heart, seemed like a memory. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to go back to the way things were. But no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I apologized, Mehran didn't seem interested in moving forward. Every time I tried to talk to him, every time I asked for a moment of connection, I was met with indifference. He'd look at me, his eyes so cold, like I was nothing but a shadow of the woman he once cherished. "I can't keep doing this," I whispered one night, my voice breaking as I tried to hold back the tears. Mehran didn't respond. He never did. My affair, had shattered something deep within him. But what hurt the most wasn't just his anger, it was his silence. It was the way he had closed himself off from me, shutting out the love I so desperately wanted to rekindle. It was as though I had become invisible to him, a ghost in the life we once built together. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was a mistake, a stain on a life he wanted to erase. I tried to show him I was sorry. I did everything I could think of, small gestures to remind him of who we had been. I wore the dress he always loved, cooked his favorite meal, even planned a weekend getaway. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. He didn't want to see me anymore, not the way he used to. He wanted to make me feel the weight of my actions, to remind me of my failure at every turn. I remember one evening, when I finally reached out to him, my hand trembling as I touched his arm. "Mehran, please," I said, my voice pleading. "I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I want us to move past this. I want to fix this." His response was cold, his eyes never meeting mine. "You don't get to fix this, Nor," he said, his words laced with venom. "You broke it. You destroyed what we had. And now you're going to live with it." The word stung, but the worst part was that I knew he was right. I had broken it. I had betrayed the man who had given me everything, and now he was making sure I would never forget it. But even in his cruelty, even in his anger, there was something else, something that twisted inside me. He wasn't just angry. He wasn't just hurt. He was trying to control me. And it wasn't just about punishing me for my mistake. No, Mehran wanted power. He wanted to see me grovel, to feel like I was beneath him, to make sure that I knew in every moment that he held the upper hand. I had always admired his strength, his confidence. But now, that same strength felt suffocating. It wasn't love I saw in his eyes anymore. It was something darker, something more dangerous. He wanted to break me, and I could feel it deep in my bones. Every time he pushed me away, every time he used the silence to make me feel small, I realized that this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a game, one where I had no control, no power, and no way out. And I hated myself for letting it happen. I hated myself for not seeing it sooner, for letting him manipulate me into believing that his coldness was somehow my fault. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about me failing him. This was about him failing me. Mehran had failed to love me when I needed him most. And now, he was using my mistake to control everything about me. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep begging for his affection, his love, when it was clear he no longer saw me as a partner. I was trapped in a cycle of regret and pain, and every day, I felt myself slipping further away from who I once was. The woman who loved with her whole heart, who believed in love and trust, was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Something had to change, but I didn't know if it was too late for us. For me, I didn't know how much longer I could take it. The pain, the guilt, the endless cycle of silence that wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud, it was all too much. Every day felt like a struggle, a fight to maintain some semblance of the person I used to be, to cling to a piece of the life I had lost. But with each passing day, the weight of Mehran's coldness grew heavier, and the distance between us only widened. The worst part? I didn't even recognize him anymore. The man I had married was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to thrive on making me feel small, insignificant. I sat at the edge of our bed one evening, my hands clenched in my lap as I stared out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. The room felt unbearably quiet, but the silence was nothing compared to the storm raging inside me. I had been living in this house with a stranger. I had been fighting for a love that no longer existed, all the while convincing myself that if I just tried harder, if I just apologized enough, things might go back to the way they were. But they wouldn't. No matter how much I begged for forgiveness, no matter how much I hoped for some kind of sign from Mehran, the truth was clear. He didn't want me anymore. He didn't desire me. He didn't love me. He just wanted control. And I had given him that control, allowing him to strip away my dignity piece by piece, convinced that I deserved it. But that night, something inside me snapped. I could feel it deep in my gut, a shift. The fear and the guilt that had bound me to him for so long began to unravel, and I realized that I was the only one who could change my life. I didn't want to live like this anymore. I couldn't. Mehran walked into the room, his usual aloofness in place. He glanced at me, not with concern or tenderness, but with the cold, calculating eyes of someone who had already decided I wasn't worth his time. He sat down beside me on the bed, not touching me, not even looking at me properly. Just there, silent, and that's when I spoke. I can't keep doing this. My voice was low but firm. The words felt like a weight lifted off my chest, like I had been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. Mehran didn't say anything, his gaze remaining fixed on the floor, but I could feel the tension in his body. He knew what was coming. "You're not the man I married anymore," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. "You've changed, and so have I. But I can't keep pretending that everything will magically go back to the way it was. I'm not your prisoner, Mehran. I'm not your possession. I'm a person. I'm a woman. And I deserve more than this." He looked up at me then, his eyes narrow, a dangerous glint in them. For the first time in a long time, there was a flicker of something, anger maybe, or frustration. But it wasn't the kind of anger that made him shout or lash out. No, this was the kind of anger that boiled beneath the surface, that simmered with control. "You think you can walk away from this?" His voice was ice, his words cutting through the room. "You think I'll just let you go after everything you've done?" But I was no longer afraid. The fear that had held me captive for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet strength I didn't even know I had. "I'm not asking for your permission," I said, my voice steady. "I'm telling you that I deserve better. I deserve to be loved, not controlled. I'm walking away, Mehran, and I'm not coming back. Not to this." His face twisted with rage, but I stood up, meeting his gaze head on. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. My own power. I'm done, I said softly but with finality. I'm done letting you break me. I'm done being your victim. And with that, I turned and walked away, feeling a sense of freedom I hadn't known in far too long. The days that followed felt surreal. I had left Mehran, left the house we once called home, and yet it wasn't the end I had imagined. There was no final confrontation, no grand gesture of reconciliation, just silence. And in that silence, I found peace. Peace I hadn't realized I was desperately searching for until that very moment. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of guilt that had crushed me for so long, the constant second-guessing and pleading for a love that no longer existed, all of it faded into the background. I had finally stopped fighting for something that was beyond repair, and in doing so, I started to fight for myself. I spent the first few weeks in a haze, healing from the emotional scars of the affair and Mehran's cruelty. But as time passed, I found myself rediscovering pieces of me I thought I had lost forever. I rekindled friendships that had withered, took up hobbies I had abandoned, and allowed myself to feel joy without the constant fear of disappointing someone else. The guilt still lingered, like a shadow at the edges of my mind, reminding me of the pain I had caused. But it no longer controlled me. I was learning to forgive myself, to embrace the idea that I was deserving of happiness, love, and respect not just from others, but from myself. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was excited to find out. I had broken free from the chains of my past, and my world was full of possibilities again. And for the first time in years, I could look at myself in the mirror and smile.